Dare great things for Christ. Christ calls us to dare great things. In the marketplace, as well as in the mission field, there has never been a time like the present for the spirit of the Catholic entrepreneur. Now is the time for men and women of great courage and great vision to engage our church and our culture. Now is the time to dare great things. And here is your host as we dare great things, Father Nathan Cromley, the president and founder of the St. John Institute.
Regardless of our positions and responsibilities, communication is always a challenge. How did the saints communicate when they needed to? In today's episode on Leadership Lessons from the Saints, I look at St. Patrick. Not only did he manage to communicate foreign ideas to his audience, but he did so in a way that was persuasive. He managed to do something with his communication that all of us leaders need to do. He communicated facts in a way that moved and promoted action. And so his leadership lesson from 1600 years ago remains true today. Hello everybody, I'm glad you're back with me again. And we have this chance to take another leadership lesson from the saints. I'm really enjoying this series because I love looking at the saints as they were. People who were just like you and me. We can look at them and they always look so epic in the stained glass windows we see of them in churches, and we can totally forget that in their day and age, they weren't always considered to be saints. I mean, towards the end of their life, maybe they were, but the majority of their life, they were people just like anyone else. And they were criticized and they had challenges, and it seemed like their world was turning upside down. And they had to deal with the stresses and strains of real work, of real organizations, of politics, of procedures, of people who have led them astray, people who betrayed them, persecutions against them. I mean, we would really be doing ourselves a disservice if we allowed these people who have been made to be the models of our Christian life to live lives that were so foreign from ours that we had nothing to do with them. On the contrary, they're examples that really inspire because they're real examples. Take, for example, the life of today's saint, which is St. Patrick. I really love this saint. I was able to lead a couple different pilgrimages now with Eagle Eye Ministries and the St. John Institute over to Ireland, where we were able to look at his life and up close. And I hope everyone who gets a chance to ever go can go, because St. Patrick's life is extraordinary in its fruitfulness and its impact. It's almost a life of epic proportions. There's legends and myths and stories that abound, even to this day, about this man who worked miracles and stared down demonic powers, and who in the hearts of many is personally responsible for the conversion of the entire island to Christianity. I mean, he's quite a figure. He's a figure of epic proportions, and his life reads like that of an epic, a person. He was taken as a slave, for example, who didn't know God, and brought to the island. This is somewhere in the 5th century, right? Brought to the island of Ireland from England as a slave, and left to take care of the sheep in the fields. Okay, so this must have been a miserable existence. He would have been exposed to the snow, exposed to the rain. He even lists that off in his confessions that he wrote, talking about how he was just left alone to fend for himself with the sheep in the fields for years, for like 6 years. He was living as a slave, captive, mistreated, left, in the fields of Ireland, taking care of the livestock with no hope, no education, no future, no nothing. And it was finally there that he began to pray. He had nothing else to do but try to find God. And so he opened his heart to prayer, and God sent his Holy Spirit into Patrick and made a personal relationship with him, where Patrick knew the God of his parents, that to whom he prayed. It's a wonderful thought that the parents of St. Patrick and their faith was what their son had to rely on at the lowest moment of his life when he had nothing else. It's a good little tip of the hat to all of you who are Christian parents and sometimes wonder if what you're doing, will make a difference. It totally does. Because at the moment when he needed God, he knew where to turn. And Patrick turned to God, and God sent his Holy Spirit and miraculously kept him warm in the fields. This is what he writes about. Until the day when he realized it was time for him to escape. And he personally traveled alone some 200 miles from the western part of the island all the way across to what we believe today would have been Wexford, Ireland, where he would have gotten on a boat. We don't know exactly where. It would have been on the east coast. And he got into a boat where it was delivered all the way back to England in this desolate part of the country. And there's all kinds of stories about dogs on the boat trying to eat him alive, and many tales that could be true, might not be true. But the long and the short of it is when he gets to England, they leave him off in this desolate part of land with no food. And it's up to Patrick to bring all of the people that were with him safely into the city. And of course, the people mock his faith, say that why does he believe in God, that God isn't going to help them find food. And Patrick challenges them. And so they say prayer together, and what happens? But a whole herd of wild boars show up, and they're able to kill them and eat, and the people survive, right? So it's like these miraculous stories of Patrick's journey. But then he finds himself, of course, he's way behind in his education. He's socially left behind in the rest of his family. And what is he going to do with his life? And God speaks to him in a dream. And he has this dream where the people in Ireland are summoning him. Come back to us, O holy youth, and walk among us. He hears this voice of the Irish people crying out in the Irish language that he learned, that they wanted him to come back. And so he did. But before coming back, he goes back to France, to Auxerre, which at that time was this international school. And you actually had saints who taught there at the time. And he was educated in theology and in the teachings of the church, and ordained a bishop, where he was sent, right, to Ireland as a bishop to bring Christianity to the island. And so coming in to the island, of course, he finds Christianity already there. There was already a Catholic bishop before him. His name was Palladius. He was the first Christian missionary to Ireland and the first bishop in Ireland. But at the same time, it was under Patrick that the faith really flourished. Patrick went all around the island. He founded monasteries. He ordained priests. He confronted druids and brought them to the faith. He converted the people and en masse to the point where he's referred to as the great apostle of Ireland. And it was underneath that bishop that the church was installed. Now, all that's fascinating, right? And we owe Patrick a great deal, and the people of Ireland, of course, especially. But what's fascinating to me is if you put yourself in those shoes, how in the world do you communicate a civilization coming from Rome, with customs coming from Rome, liturgy coming from Rome, to a totally foreign people in a way that those people will adopt not only the ideas that you have in your mind, but also the way of life that you practice, and adopt it so profoundly that even to this day, the island remains majority Catholic, right? And certainly supermajority, Christian. And with all the challenges that the Irish culture faces today, notwithstanding, it's a place whose culture was marked by Christ, claimed by Christ. How do you do that? How do you communicate that effectively, that in one lifespan, you're able to convert tens of thousands of people and have them adopt a way of life? That's what I want to look at with you, right? Because all of us in our leadership, whatever kind of organizations that we're running, even if it's our families, we have this foundational problem that all of us face, that there's a bridge between the us and the them. Right? And that bridge, that little gap, as soon as you say an us and a them, you now have a challenge to overcome. Because I'm going to be speaking always from my vantage point to you who have a different vantage point about something that I want us to have in common. Oh my goodness. It's no small wonder that communication is such a challenge. And anyone who leads, knows that this is something that people always complain about. You didn't communicate enough. We didn't really know what you meant. Well, we were all lost. No one understood what we were supposed to do together, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just a constant drumbeat, right? So I thought this would be a great chance for us to look at Patrick and try to understand, does he have any genius that he could convey to us? And when you look at his life, yes, in fact, he did. He was a master communicator. You cannot bring people over to your side unless they want to come. And Patrick was able to speak to their hearts and touch their hearts in such a masterful way that they actually wanted to follow him. They wanted to adopt his way of life, his vision of the world, the faith, right, of the church. They wanted to adopt it. Why? What did Patrick do that we could learn from in his approach to people? And I see three essential qualities that I'd like to drill into with you.
St. John Institute invites our working women listeners to the Professional Women's Mountain Leadership Retreat, created to develop your call to leadership in both the workplace and at home. Mass, adoration, confession, and individual prayer time are accompanied by our leadership lessons specifically designed for the professional women and challenges of work-life balance. Hosted amidst the Rocky Mountains in Evergreen, Colorado, retreat dates are October 21st to October 24th. Visit stjohninstitute.org to learn more and register.
When you look at the life of St. Patrick overall, I mean, you're looking at someone who, first of all, lived a long time ago. He lived in the 400s, right? The 5th century. There's all kinds of debate around the exact time of his birth and death, and there's a lot that said that they don't know about him and other things that they say that they do. We know enough about him, though, to draw some great lessons in our leadership. Because beyond all of the facts of his leadership, which are incredible, I mean, the number of conversions, the number of monasteries made, the number of priests ordained, the spread of the faith in an island, it's not done automatically. It's done with a lot of human grit, drive, a lot of passion, a lot of intelligence. And we can imitate that intelligence ourselves in our workplaces today. Because we, in many ways, face a similar circumstance as St. Patrick. People come into our teams with their own set of expectations, their own set of beliefs, right? Their own ways of doing things. And we need to effectively communicate to them the vision that we have as leaders. And that communication gap is what I want to look at with you and how Patrick overcame that in his own life. Because if we can overcome that today and effectively communicate, something marvelous happens. We unite. Communication is a tool leaders use to produce unity, right? So words that we speak are words that are designed to bring multiple positions together, multiple people on board. I'm going from the many to the one, because the leader has the unique, distinct advantage of a position of power where our word becomes the directive. Okay, so that directive is the unifying line of thought that allows all of our different activities to reach the desired goal. So the leader has to have a vision of the goal. This is what we're trying to achieve. And then needs to communicate that vision with a clearly motivating message that allows people to come from wherever they are and join the train, so to speak, jump on the train that brings them all together towards this final product. So if the final product might be, we're going to expand the company by 25%. We're going to add another line of manufacturing. We're going to add 15 more, products that we're going to create. It might be, we need to create a sales pitch that will reach to this market. It might be a strategy of what types of markets that we hit, one after the next. There's all kinds of things that we have to do, but all of them entail the same functionality. Someone in charge who enunciates for everybody the unifying message of what is to be done. It's just that can be done in many ways. Some of them are good and some of them are not good. Some people are effective in communicating and other people are not. What's the difference? Well, the difference can be, on the one hand, the clarity of the vision, absolutely. The others, but most of the time, the reason we fail in communication is not that we don't know what we're doing. We do know what we're doing. It's that we fail to take into account enough the people who are listening to us, where they're coming from, what they need to know, how they need us to serve them. And this, of course, was a truth that St. Thomas Aquinas, back in his day, even enunciated. He said, you need to communicate with someone according to the mode of the recipient. So according to the way that they need the truth to be packaged for them. All right, so we have to adjust our vocabulary, adjust our rhythm, adjust our examples. But also we need to think, what do they need? Where are they coming from? Because in the end, people will only listen to things that they think are useful for them. If you didn't agree with the topic or you didn't see how pertinent this was for you, you would have left long ago. You wouldn't have stayed for this whole course. It's only because the teacher's able to communicate the urgency and the importance of something for your life that you're willing to listen to the teacher. Well, it's the same for any of the saints. And St. Patrick shows us this in a marvelous way. The very first thing that he did is that he showed his love for the culture that he was in communication with. Remember this line, of course, this very famous line. Ronald Reagan used to say this all the time. People won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. The very first thing we need to do as a communicator is make sure that the people understand that we're with them, that we understand them. And so Patrick came over speaking their language, the language that he had learned as a slave. Isn't it interesting how God used that negative in his life to prepare him for his mission? He learned as a slave to speak their language, but he spoke their language. And he spoke it with enough love and embraced their culture, showing the holiness that he found already latent in the Irish way that he was summoning out from them. You see, he didn't come proclaiming a message that said that where they were now had to totally be abandoned behind for a new position. No, he showed that the new position he was bringing them to could already be found where they were. It wasn't so much abandoning the old as it was allowing the old to grow into its proper and most beautiful manifestation. This, of course, is a great principle to remind yourself of. When I'm speaking with someone, everyone's going to be afraid to leave where they are. Your customer doesn't want to part with their money. They're quite happy having their money in their wallet. Why would they want to get rid of it, right? Your employee doesn't really want to hear that there's a new project that's going to take more of their time and effort, right? So how do I tell someone to change when change is the thing that they're most afraid of? Well, it's not so much changing as abandoning the old as it is completing where they are, taking where they are now and their next step being a completion, an advancement, something that's going to make their life even better than it is now. Patrick was able to do that because he followed the very first and foundational principle of communication. He started with where the people were and he loved them where they were. He embraced what was good and true and authentic in their culture, and he didn't ask them to reject that. Instead, he entered into it with them to show how Christ would bring what they had and what they believed to its fulfillment in a beautiful and resplendent fashion. And by so doing, he gained their heart. He went after their heart even before he went after their mind. He allowed their mind to follow the heart, which is why his conversions endured all the way through time to today, where the Irish people continue to profess the faith of Christ. And wouldn't it be great if our communication could somehow, in some way, be the same?
Would you like to start your Thursday mornings with a scriptural leadership lesson? Join the St. John Leadership Network, where Father Nathan hosts a 30-minute call at 6:30 a.m. in all 4 U.S. time zones. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
In the lives of all the saints, there's leadership lessons. There are things that we can imitate, that we can learn from, because they, just like us, were faced with realities and challenges and stressors and things that they had to accomplish in difficult circumstances. And St. Patrick had to accomplish a very difficult thing. He was communicating a faith that would also bring with it a cultural change to people who were quite happy in the culture that they had. Right? There's the famous example of the sacrifices at Tara, right? Tara Mountain. When Patrick first came over to Ireland, he found that there was the king of the local area there who was having pagan ceremonies which entailed an entire cultural matrix and ideas and philosophy of the world at Tara, and the king had forbidden any other celebrations from taking place from the sacred fire that was burning on the mountain of Tara. Well, Patrick had a different idea. He had a different sacred fire, the sacred fire of Christ, right? And so how are you going to communicate to these people that Jesus Christ is an equal God, or superior God, of course, but like that he had a footing to even dialogue with them, to convert their worldview to the worldview of Christ? Well, Patrick had to do something rather brave. But he used the same metaphor that was being used at Terah, a fire on top of the mountain, and he lit a fire on the hill of slain in honor of Jesus Christ, summoning everybody to that worldview, but using the same metaphor of the sacred flame. Now, there's all kinds of stories that abound about that encounter then, because Patrick went and preached the gospel then to the king, who had forbidden the fire to be burning because he made this rebellious act. And according to legend, he ended up overthrowing the Druids that were there and made the first converts to Christianity on the island. Well, the Catholic Church continues this tradition, and on the eve of Easter, kindles the sacred fire that burns in the night and then lights the Easter candle from that fire. And that goes all the way back to Patrick, who insisted upon this image. But this, of course, wasn't the only time that Patrick did this. You have the famous usage of the shamrock to express the Trinity. And people will say Patrick never really did this, and other people say he really did do this. And kind of regardless, it epitomizes a whole approach that Patrick took to communication. In other words, when you have a concept to bring to people that is a new concept, don't start off from where you are, from the vantage point of the new that you want to bring. Start off with what they can understand. Look for bridge points where their mind and their thought is already open to the newness that you want to bring forth, and then meet them with the newness there where they're already open to it. Okay, so if you take the shamrock, for example, there's all kinds of trilogies or trinities present in Irish thought. For example, the pagan virtues of loyalty, courage, and generosity. Well, Patrick took those into faith, hope, and charity. Now, he's not saying that they're equivalent, but they already had this foundation, and he met them there to bring the new concepts, faith, hope, and charity, and to build them on the old that they already had present. It's like a master teacher or like a mother or a father does with their children. So Patrick did. You don't just start off asking your pupil to enter into a whole new world. You need to take the new world and bring it into the old by showing how it matches and fits with a worldview that they already had. That takes a genius. That's a communication genius. And yet at the same time, it's what we need to do to be effective in our own life. If you've got an announcement to make, for example, about where the company's going, you don't just start with the facts and the figures about where you see the vision of the company. You start with their past successes. What have we done that's so great? What have we done, and why have we done it? Okay, now if we can take what we've done and why we've done it, and we simply say now there's a new objective to do something else new for the same reason, well, people can understand, well, we're taking another step forward, another step up. And the change is made, well, from the inside. Everybody wants to advance based upon the successes that they currently have. Right? It's such a common sense communication technique, but we often forget it because it takes a little bit of time. We have to both accept and embrace the people where they're at that we're talking to, and then we need to show and look for where is it that my message interposes with where they currently are. Whereas the first apostle to Ireland, Palladius, he came as a representative of the Christian church to convert the pagans. Patrick came as a friend of the people to introduce them to a friend who had helped him when he needed him the most. He made a dovetail between the latent desire of the heart and the culture of this people for friendship with their relationship with Christ. I remember seeing the same thing when I hiked from Ballintubber, Ireland, all the way, along the path of St. Patrick towards Croagh Patrick. And this, of course, is the King's Highway that they had created, and you can still see it to this day. These elevated stones that they put into a road that stretched for miles, and it goes right from Ballintubber, right through the Irish countryside, up to the top of Croagh Patrick, or Patrick's Mountain, that the Druids had made this road way back in antiquity as the pathway that they would take their harvest up to sacrifice to the pagan deities. Well, Patrick would walk along that road, and he found these, almost like you'd imagine like a milestone marker or type of like pillar that you could line up with and see the sun as it set over the hills on the different dates. And it was marked with a circle, a simple circle on it that represented the sun. Well, Patrick, instead of denying, of course, which is a very insufficient worship of God by worshiping the sun, and denying the circle, he simply put a cross over the top of that circle. Of course, and according to legend, right, and who knows about all these different things, there's many different historical, takes on this, but one of them is that that's the origin of the Celtic cross, where you have the cross with this circle behind it. And I got to see in actual post that Patrick had drawn the cross over the top of that circle, over the top of the worship of the Son, the true light of the world, who is Jesus Christ. And by so doing, he allowed the people to take what was good in their own understanding of things and find its fulfillment in Christ. In the same way, when I'm communicating with an audience or I'm communicating with a group of employees, I need to build on where they're at to take them to the next step so that they come with me voluntarily of their own accord and with the depth of their heart. That's good communication. The final point of the communication that I think that Patrick can really teach us if we pay attention to him is the value and the role of passion. Remember that people don't follow just ideas, they follow people, right? So you need to embody the truth that you're expressing. Now, of course, there's different levels of communication, and obviously in the professional sphere, a lot of our communication is rather practical, rather mundane. But remember that the people looking to you aren't looking to you as if you can be replaced. If you can replace yourself with an artificial intelligence or a robot, well, you're not really leading. You're simply providing a functionary service in an organization. Leadership is always human. It always is an embodiment of values that transcend what is purely practical. And that's related by the passion that we carry inside, the dedication of our life. Patrick took the truths, for example, that he was speaking of, and he embodied them, not only by his celibacy, but by his labors and his fastings. And the courage that he took was he took his life in his hand. This passion is related to us on his breastplate, the famous prayer that he would say every day for protection as he went forth on his missionary journey. And I leave that with you. I think as we listen to it together, we can't help but be smitten in the same way that the Irish were smitten with the force of this man's conviction and his spirit, which is so winsome and beautiful. Christ be with me, Christ within me, Christ behind me, Christ before me, Christ beside me, Christ to win me, Christ to comfort and restore me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ in quiet, Christ in danger, Christ in hearts of all that love me, Christ in mouth of friend and stranger. Amen.
Dare great things for Christ.
Share your feedback with Father Nathan. Send us an email at communications@stjohninstitute.org. That's communications@stjohninstitute.org. And visit www.stjohninstitute.org and sign up for our newsletter to receive updates from Father Nathan.